Your patient refuses an injection, but you go ahead and give it anyway, and now you're being sued for assault. And you risk your license being taken away for good. Let's talk about what just happened.
Okay, in today's lesson, we're going to look at legal considerations like state and federal laws and how it affects your nursing practice. So we're going to start with federal law. So federal laws are things like HIPAA, the ADA, EMTALA, restraints, or accreditation. HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. We go into that in a lot more detail in another lesson, so go check that one out. The ADA is the American with Disabilities Act. So this federal law basically says that all patients need to be treated equal, regardless of disability, and you have to apply accommodations for them. So things like wheelchair ramps and automatic doors, etc. EMTALA is the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act. And what it is it's a federal law that says a patient has to be a patient that presents to the emergency room for an emergency can't be turned away for treatment. The other thing it says is that if a patient has an emergency, that the patient has to be stabilized before they can be transferred anywhere else. With restraints, there's a whole nother lesson on it, but the important thing to know is that restraints are a federal issue. So go check out that to get more details.
No one is going to save you. Not your professor, not your textbook, not some free video on YouTube. Look, this video is going to help you, but the entire survival package lives over at nursing.com. After you watch this free video, head over there and get your NCLEX ready score and take a SIMCLEX now.
The biggest thing on this is accreditation. So along with the federal laws, there are two main players that help to enforce the laws and provide accreditation for healthcare facilities. One is the Joint Commission, which we call TJC or JCO. The other one is CMS, or the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. They levy fines and penalties. They can shut down the hospitals if the hospitals aren't following the rules set up by CMS and TJC. So the big thing to know is that these guys are the big guns. In every state, there is a board of nursing, and they regulate nursing practice, scope of practice, licensure. They are the ones that deal with violation. There's another important governing body called the NCSBN, which is the National Council of State Boards of Nursing. They actually regulate the boards of nursing and provide oversight. The NCSBN is also in charge of compact licenses. So let's say you get a compact license in Texas and you want to go practice in Oklahoma, you can go do so without having to sit for the NCLEX again, or you would have to get a new license. But I'm going to put a big star right here because this is really important. So let's say you get your licensure in Texas and you want to go practice in Oklahoma, and you're in Oklahoma, you have to follow Oklahoma's laws, not Texas's. You want to actually pay attention to the laws that you are of the state that you are practicing in, not just the one that you got licensed in. So here's a word that you're going to see often throughout fundamental stuff. It's called tort law. And so what's a tort? So a tort is a wrongdoing against a person. So if you do something that hurts or harms someone else or damages their property, that is a tort. There are three types that we look at when we're talking about tort law in nursing: unintentional torts, quasi-intentional torts, and intentional torts. Unintentional torts are things you do that aren't meant to harm the patient, but you do them anyway. So an example of this would be like if you hung the wrong tube feeding on a patient, you didn't think the doctor was going to change the order, but they did anyway, and you didn't recognize it. And so you caused harm to the patient. Didn't mean to do it. It was a mistake, but it was negligence. Two types of unintentional torts are negligence and malpractice. When we look at quasi-intentional torts, this is something that you say, right? So something that you say that causes harm to someone or their reputation. So if you release that a patient has HIV and they're fired from their job for it, that's a quasi-intentional tort. So defamation of character, sharing of private health information that causes harm. Intentional torts are things you knowingly and willfully do to a patient that cause harm. So if you knowingly or willingly do it, right? So things like giving an injection to a patient. So if you give an injection to a patient and they refuse it, but you give it anyway, that is knowingly and willfully causing harm to a patient. This can actually this can result in assault or battery or both. And that kind of leads me to the next topic we're talking about is criminal and civil law. So how do criminal and civil laws affect nurses? Well, we have to follow the law. If not, we could face criminal or criminal law. So how do criminal laws and civil laws affect nurses? We have to follow the law. And if we don't, we could face lawsuits or face criminal charges. So let's go back to the patient that refused the injection. Well, let's say the patient refuses the injection and the nurse gives it any. What happens? Well, criminally, they could be charged with assault and or battery. The other thing that could happen is that the patient could sue the nurse. So this could bring criminal charges and this could bring a lawsuit. And the nurse could be forced to pay money and also be charged criminally with a crime. And sometimes both of these things happen. The big takeaway is that you need to follow the law, period. So running through our nursing concepts for legal considerations, we talk about ethical and legal practice, we talk about health policy, and then we also talk about professionalism. All right, lots of stuff today, but it really shapes what you should and shouldn't do when you practice. So let's recap. Federal law. These are health policies created by the federal government. These are things like HIPAA, the ADA, and restraints. There are major penalties for violating these laws, so make sure that you follow them. We talk about state law. Boards of nursing regulate state practice. The NCSBN regulates your NCLEX. That happens kind of at the state level. Torts. These are wrongdoings against another person. So the last thing we want to look at is criminal and civil law. There are criminal and civil penalties if you don't follow the law or if you harm your patient. Thanks for sticking with me today through some not fun, but really, really important information. There's one thing to remember from today is to follow the law. So be sure to check out all the resources attached to this lesson. Now go out and be your best selves today. And as always, happy nursing.
You're not failing because you're lazy. You're failing because no one gave you a survival plan that actually works. This video will help, but it's not enough. Head over to nursing.com to get your NCLEX Ready score and take a SIMCLEX now to know you're ready, not just hope.